Hey everybody, it's Brock and we got a brand new episode of All About. We're at month 4 of the new Reef tank and we got a lot of exciting things to talk about, from low salinity fixes, Aiptasia coming out of the rockwork, moving anemones around, and much more. If this is the first video you've landed on about the new tank, be sure to check out the complete setup guide I did to get up to this point. Let's dive in. Now, I actually had this video ready to go until the ice storm hit, so you'll get to see what I was working on at the beginning of the month and then what ended up happening with the ice storm after. We're moving from a 75 gallon to a 62. I wanted to make sure I was keeping up with my parameters in case anything started to get out of the norm. As it dealt with ammonia, nitrate, nitrites, and phosphates, wasn't having anything crazy occur. They'd rise over the month, do my water change, and then get them back in sync. What did catch me by surprise was when I tested my salinity at the beginning of the month. It was a whopping 1.021, which is not dangerous, but definitely lower than I like my reef tank to be. I try to shoot for 0.24 to 2.5. So my plan was to let the tank evaporate water naturally for 2 to 3 days, and instead of putting fresh water in to top it off, I would pour salt water into the tank. This would allow the tank to slowly raise that salinity, and after the first evaporation, I would test the salinity the next day after topping it off, and it was reading 0.22. After 3 days of evaporating, adding again, came up another point. After 3 or 4 times of doing this, my salinity was back at 1.024. When I would top off the tank, I was maybe pouring 1 to 2 gallons in at a time, so this allowed the tank to gradually rise in salinity so that it would not affect my corals or fish. So you might ask yourself, why the salinity dropped? My main guess is while I was fighting with the water levels in loud chambers, I was not very precise on the water level. I was taking water out, pouring it back in, topping it off on other days. So in that time, I'm betting my salinity levels slowly got out of whack. So if you're in a situation where your salinity is too high or too low, as long as it's not at critical levels, take your time fixing it. I've seen so many people make mistakes when wanting to raise their salinity, and they dump 10 gallons of salt hoping it'll help, but then you end up on the other side of the scale, making things worse for yourself and your fish, corals, and inverts. Especially those inverts. They're very fragile to salinity changes. Aiptasia in the tank. Cue an eye roll. Where in the world did these guys come from? Especially since I added all new rockwork. They can be sneaky for sure. My thoughts are for new corals I got last month, they must have been very shriveled up against the base of the branches on the Euphilia. Aiptasia can also be microscopic eggs against the coral, and they can also shrivel up very tiny against the rockwork, and you might mistake them for just being a part of that. This is why you should always dip your corals, which I did not this time. I just inspected them for a while. There's a ton of different Aiptasia killing products. All of them do the same kind of thing. You shake the bottle, suck some of it in the syringe, and very slowly reach the spout of the mouth. Over them in the solution, they'll eat it and essentially disintegrate from the inside out. I also like to recommend you turn off your power heads while doing this. Keeps the dispersal of that solution minimal. And after about 30 minutes, I also like to suck up the solution with the remnants of the Aiptasia. They can be really bad about releasing eggs in the water column as a last resort survival technique when they're about to perish. Anyone can tell me what this hitchhiker's name is in the comments, I'd love to know. Lots of places online point to a stomatella snail, but the shell is rigid like a roly-poly, and no snail flesh protrudes on the outside like a stomatella usually would. The underside has a fleshy body that moves around like a snail, just slow and methodical, across the rockwork and some on the glass. Amphipod was another guess I had, but these have very visible legs, like legs of a copepod would. So it wasn't that. Most likely answer I could find was a chitin. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, but they're just some algae eating hitchhikers from the looks of it. I usually only see them at night too, coming out to graze. Let me know what you think. We also got some hitchhiker feather dusters that were really cool. Haven't had those before. From my previous videos, you've probably heard me say that my anemones just have not come out the same as they had in the previous tank, to the extent of splitting multiple times and becoming more of a bulb shape rather than the long stretched out look they had before. This middle rock had been on my bad side for a while, and I'm now to the decision of removing it completely because I feel like there are some pests on it like vermitid snails and spinid worms. I just can't really see them. Reason being is my anemones have been trying to move completely off this middle rock. It's one of the only ones I brought over from the old tank. Drain some water, run my tank into a bucket, move the rock to the bucket so I could try to get these anemones off the rockwork. Luckily, this rock did not have a lot of larger deep holes that the anemones could have sunk their foot into, making it virtually impossible to move them. On this rock, most had their foot on a flat piece of it. When moving anemones, you want to make sure you're doing more of a rubbing and pushing with your finger rather than a scraping with your fingernail. You do not want to damage the foot or the skin of the anemone by scratching the skin with your nails. That will cause more stress towards the anemone and could result in it perishing in worst case scenarios. I wasn't sure how well I'd be able to film this by myself with my head deep in a bucket, but hopefully you get the idea that I'm slowly brushing up against the edge of the foot of the anemone, and once it raises up enough for me to get my finger underneath, almost like taking the sticker off at that point. Follow the path of their foot until it has completely let go of the rock. If I remember correctly, there were 6 anemones I had to move off of this rock, and after successfully getting them off the rock, it was time to move them into the tank. Turned off all the power heads, turned off my pump, so I could give the anemones time to grab onto the rocks in the new area before blowing them around again. The pores on your hand are much tighter than somewhere like your forearm or on top of your hand, so you usually don't have to worry about them stinging you while handling them carefully. Since most anemones already move over to the left side, I moved them here as well. I had a small cave that I tried placing them all near in case one was to lose hold of that foot, they'd be able to go into that hole and still have a chance to grab back on. All anemones did eventually grab on, and I was able to turn on the pumps again. Still left my AI power head off for the day just to give them more time to really find a hold. Anemones can be bad about moving some when first introduced to a new spot. There's now only one anemone on the right side that is deep in a hole, so we'll see if I ever get that one out. I feel like the clownfish won't hang out on the left side as much because he keeps having to swim to the other side of the tank checking on the lonely anemones. With the new corals, I had them in some holes of the rocks, but with wavy current, they were losing their footing and falling out into the sand bed. So went ahead and ordered some AquaStik. This is a solid choice for gluing rocks, hard branches into the tank. I wouldn't recommend it for like small fragging to plugs though. It's pretty straightforward. You cut a portion of the tube off, mix the outer layer with the inner between your fingers until you have it mixed up thoroughly. Then I squish the branch of the hammer into the Play-Doh-like substance and go to shoving it into the hole. I can then use my fingers to flatten some of it along the rock just to make sure it grabs hold. Usually takes a solid 5 minutes or so before it hardens, which is why I don't recommend it for your fragging to plugs. You'd be holding it there for a while. I also had the purple hammers up top that were in a hole, but I think the clownfish was moving this coral as it was near the anemone on the right side of the tank. Did the same thing, got some of the AquaStik on the bottom of the branch, pushed it in the hole of the rockwork. Next were the candy canes. I like them under this right side. I had them poking out of a shadow from the rockwork above them. They really swelled up on this side. Loved it. Lastly was the massive frog spawn that sits right in front of the anemone, so instead of the clownfish hosting them, they constantly got pushed off of the rock. I placed this frog spawn in the hole and then just spread the solution around the base of the branch where it entered that hole, hoping it would give it a little more hold when the clownfish tries to push on it. I'm trying to remember what the package says, but it's something like an hour and it'll fully cement and you'll be good to go. The morning of January 24th, my hometown was hit with a mixture of ice rain and thunderstorms that eventually led to 90% of the parish being without power for many days. Reports state we got over 2 inches of ice in my area, and from what Google states, 1 inch of ice is equal to 10 inches of snow. And it wasn't just the ice that caused so much damage to the grid. In Louisiana, we are surrounded by pine trees, and these trees were constantly breaking limbs and even some exploding all throughout the day and night, wrecking a majority of the havoc on power lines and transformers. Made it far too dangerous for crews to even assess the damage or fix the down lines for multiple days. Our power at home was out for 6 days. Some of my best friends didn't get power back for 10. I need you to understand that I've lived in Louisiana my entire life and we've never been without power for more than 48 hours, and I've never seen damage like this before. So y'all know I like to keep my videos very open and honest. I tell you about the highs of the hobby and also include you in the lows. That's how I think we can all learn together and continue to get better and better at this saltwater aquarium hobby. And I'll tell you right now, my reef tank crashed. Not a thing survived. It's been heartbreaking to lose a clownfish that I've had for the last 12 years of my life. These fish are like your dogs. You love them. You try to do everything for them, but sometimes unforeseeable happens. I'm going to walk you through everything that I did to try and prepare for the storm and what happened during it. What I'm hoping is that in the comments you can all share your experience with power outages and ways you were able to get through it. And I'm very curious if anyone has been able to last more than 6 days without having some serious Generac connected to their house. That way, any future viewers that watch this video, they can read through and prepare for an upcoming storm that's hitting in their area. I'd really like detailed responses too. Please don't just go in the comments and say, oh, you're an idiot, you should have had a generator. That doesn't help anyone. Tell us the brand of equipment you're using, how much was it, how long did it last without power, how much gasoline did you have on hand. That's what's really helped the hobbyists trying to survive an outage. Now again, I've lived in Louisiana all my life, and I've had at least one saltwater tank set up since 2014. And after all these years, this is the first one I've lost to an extended power outage. In Louisiana, every 2 to 3 years we'll have a hurricane, and every 3 to 5 we might see some snow. So going into it, I was prepping for being without power for 2 to 3 days. No biggie, right? Just some ice rain coming. The best thing you got to have is a battery operated air pump. I have one from AquaStik that will automatically come on when the power goes out. Takes 2 D batteries, usually lasts 48 hours. Obviously had some extra D batteries on just in case. Next thing I had was some extra fresh and salt water on hand. Sometimes it can be beneficial to do small water changes to make sure your levels aren't rising too quickly with no filtration going on. And the third thing I had were thick blankets that I could wrap around the tank to try and keep in as much heat inside until we waited for the power to come back. These 3 solutions have saved my tank for the last 12 years until this storm. Saturday morning, ice rain begins, and not even 2 hours into it, our power goes out. That didn't feel good at all. Bubbler comes on, fed the fish, covers are over the tank. Day goes by, no power still. Wake up Sunday, the house is freezing. Family's all huddled up in one room together. Got down to around 48 degrees already in the house. More ice rain hits. Monday and Tuesday, absolute worst happens. Temperature outside drops from 30 to 14 degrees. So now the ice that fell can't even melt at this point. More trees are falling, crews are delayed longer, and the fish tank is getting deadly cold. Couldn't even get them to come out at this point. And you already know how it ends. Wednesday goes by, still no power. Then Thursday night, we get a report back that the neighborhood has power again. I'm a father too, and I had to get my little kiddos somewhere warm in the middle of this storm. Putting 2 batteries in the air pump and just hoping the cold wouldn't get to them was so hard to deal with. At the end of the day, very thankful for my family and friends to be safe and sound from the storm. There's still a lot of cleanup to go around town, and the reef got a long road to recovery. We went back that Thursday night. Sadly, the fish had not made it. Corals were obviously bleached from no lining. The inverts, including anemones and snails, were gone too. It's gonna sting for a while losing my clownfish at them. Ends are not bad things, it just means something else is about to begin. In the midst of that chaos, sometimes you miss things, or don't think of better solutions until it's too late. Being a dad, getting my kiddos to safety was my biggest priority. Later, I did think of other routes I could have taken that could have given my fish a better chance at survival. One of them was checking with my local fish store. 90% of our town was without power, but what if they were the 10%? So always check with your LFS. We always took in fish for others when I worked there. Another solution was my 11-gallon tank that I hadn't set up. Take that and set it up where we had to stay with power. There's a chance it could have just recycled and hurt the fish, causing them to perish, but as a last resort, could have worked. One option I saw in the comments of my post while it was going on was moving the fish into buckets with the aerator. Y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, but the only reason I was not too fond of trying this was because of the ammonia, nitrates, and phosphates rising too quickly in 5 gallons versus 62 gallons. Could be wrong though. Got plenty of comments for generators. To be honest, my family's never owned or ever needed one until this point in our lifetime. I'm also curious how many gallons of gasoline I'd need for it to have ran those 6 days to have a heater and lights plugged into it. Battery backups were a common comment. From what I saw, you'd be paying a pretty penny to have one last that amount of days. I will definitely look into getting one of these in the future though. And at that, I think I'll end the video here. Like I said before, if you have any suggestions on how to survive a power outage of this length, definitely let future viewers know in the comments. It could save their reef. And what I thought this year's monthly check-ins were going to be watching the new tank's reef grow, and now be recovering from the crash. As always, I appreciate each and every one of you for watching my videos. This hobby is a big part of my life. I strive to be the best reef keeper you can be and help y'all along the way. Next month's check-in, we'll get into how to bring this reef back to life. So y'all stay safe, be kind, and I'll see y'all later.